They called it the king's treasure, a rose of pure gold, shimmering under the torchlight. But no one knew. This single flower would steal a father's life and haunt his son forever. Stay with me till the end, and make sure you're subscribed, because this golden rose carries a secret so dark, it nearly ended a dynasty. The palace courtyard was silent the night the golden rose arrived. That servants whispered as they carried it in. A single flower, sculpted from gold, resting in a velvet box. The king smiled with pride. His son, the young prince, watched in awe. No one questioned where it had come from. No one dared ask why it had appeared. But the next morning, the king would not wake. The court went into chaos. Bells tolled for morning, and the corridors of the palace echoed with hushed conspiracies. Physicians swore there was no wound, no poison they could detect. His heart had simply stopped. But the prince, now trembling on the throne beside his father's lifeless body, could not look away from the golden rose that sat there, untouched, gleaming as if mocking them all. That the more he stared, the colder he felt. Like the rose itself was alive and watching. The royal advisor ordered the rose to be removed at once, but no servant dared touch it. That one trembling hand reached out, and the petals felt warm, almost pulsing, like a heartbeat trapped in gold. A faint metallic scent filled the air, and whispers spread. This is no gift, it's a curse. That night, the rose was locked in a chest of iron, buried deep beneath the palace. But the prince could not sleep, because he swore he heard it breathing. By dawn, the palace awoke to screams. That the guards who had locked away the rose were found collapsed, their eyes wide open in frozen terror. No blade touched them, no mark of struggle, only the same faint scent of metal lingered in the air. When the prince rushed to the vault, his heart sank. The iron chest was empty, and on the throne in the great hall sat the golden rose, glinting in the morning sun, as if it had never been moved. The court gathered in silence, their eyes locked on the gleaming flower. The prince refused to approach, but the high priest whispered, "If the rose has chosen the throne, it seeks blood." That night, the prince dreamt of his father, pale and lifeless, a single golden petal resting on his chest. He awoke drenched in sweat, only to find that same petal lying on his pillow. From that moment, he knew the rose wasn't finished with his family. By morning, the palace was restless. Servants whispered in the corridors, avoiding the rose's chamber as if it were cursed. The prince ordered the flower locked away in the treasury, surrounded by iron and guards. Yet, when he visited at dusk, the rose was gone. In its place, a single golden thorn lay on the floor, pointing toward his father's private study. The room smelled faintly of the same strange, sweet scent that filled his father's lungs on the night he died. The prince's hands trembled as he pushed open the study door. That moonlight spilled across the empty desk, and there, on the polished wood, sat the golden rose, fresh as if it had just bloomed. Its petals glimmered, wet with morning dew that had no reason to be there. He reached out, but a sudden gust blew through the windows, and for the first time, he noticed the reflection in the glass, his father's pale, lifeless face staring back at him, as though the rose had carried the memory of death with it. The prince stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. He had thought it was only a reflection, until the scent of wilted flowers filled the room. The shadows stretched along the walls, curling like vines, and the golden rose began to hum. A low, metallic whisper that seemed to call his name. A memory surged forward. The night his father collapsed, clutching that very flower, murmuring words no one could understand now. Those same words seemed to echo in the chamber, and the prince realized the rose wasn't just a gift. It was a warning. The chamber doors slammed shut as if pushed by an unseen hand. The candles flickered wildly, throwing fractured light across the golden petals. The prince's fingers trembled as he reached out, but before he could touch the rose, he heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. He turned, and there stood a figure in the shadows, wearing the same crown his father had worn the night he died. Its face was hidden, but the voice was his father's. It spoke only 3 words: "Do not follow." The prince staggered back, heart hammering in his chest. He wanted to run, yet his feet were rooted to the cold stone floor. The shadow moved closer, the glint of the crown catching the candlelight, and for a moment, he swore he saw the pale, lifeless face of his father beneath it. Then, nothing, the figure dissolved into the darkness as if it had never been there. When the prince looked back at the pedestal, the golden rose was gone, only a single petal remained, and where it touched the floor, a dark stain began to spread. By morning, the palace was in chaos. Servants whispered of ghosts roaming the halls, while the court physicians examined the mysterious stain left by the rose. It wasn't wax or blood, but something in between, as if the flower had bled its own curse into the floor. The prince refused to speak of what he'd seen, but that night, he heard the familiar footsteps again, pacing outside his door. Then a voice, low and trembling, drifted through the crack. "You took what was mine, and now you will pay the price." The prince froze, his breath shallow in the dark. He wanted to call for the guards, but a heavy dread kept him silent. Slowly, the door creaked open on its own. No one stood there. Only the faint smell of the rose, sweet and rotting at the same time. A single petal drifted across the floor, curling as though burned by an invisible fire. He realized, with a shiver, that the curse had not ended with his father. It had only chosen a new heir. The prince staggered back, clutching the rose in trembling hands. Its golden petals shimmered unnaturally, as though whispering secrets he couldn't quite hear. From the shadows, portraits of his ancestors seemed to lean closer, their painted eyes glaring with silent warning. He felt the weight of the crown pressing on him, even though it wasn't on his head. Yet somewhere deep in the castle halls, a clock struck midnight, and with the final chime, the rose's stem began to bleed a single drop of dark sap. The drop of sap slid down the prince's hand, cold as ice. And then his vision blurred. He stumbled toward the window, and in the glass reflection, he saw not himself, but his father's pale, lifeless face staring back. The golden rose pulsed once, like a heart that should not beat, and the prince felt the walls of the chamber closing in behind him. The court watched in terrified silence, too afraid to speak, for they all remembered what happened the last time the king had touched that cursed flower. The prince sank to his knees, clutching the golden rose as if it could explain itself. A soft wind whispered through the hall, snuffing out a candle, and in that fleeting darkness, he finally understood why his father had died. It wasn't poison. It wasn't betrayal. It was the curse of desire itself, a crown that demanded blood, and a rose that chose who would wear it. And from that night on, no one dared touch the golden rose again. It remained locked away, its petals glinting in the shadows, waiting for the next heir brave or foolish enough to hold it.